Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and this week instead of my usual written blog post, I have created a video blog for you all to enjoy. So today I'm going to talk about Canada's new anti-spam law and how it's going to affect organizations and their email marketing techniques. I'm sure that all of you marketers and business people watching have heard of it. The new law hasn't yet come into effect, but the fact is that the new anti-spam law is going to basically affect every business that sends out any kind of email or digital marketing. But really, it's not all terrible. I mean, there has to be some kind of reason the Canadian government is going to all this trouble to create a new law. In a nutshell, the anti-spamming laws are to protect consumers. It prohibits spamming, hacking, malware, fraud, harvesting, and privacy invasion. But wait a second, isn't that all stuff that completely nullifies any kind of organizational honesty and transparency? So if you look at the conditions that are set out for email marketers to follow, it all ties back to the organization to be more honest with their customers. Oh, and did I mention that there can be a fine up to $10 million per violation? So I'm thinking if you had to choose between being honest and paying millions of dollars, the honest approach is probably better. Canada isn't the only country to have come up with these rules either. Other countries that have already implemented some kind of anti-spam law include China, Australia, Argentina, Ireland, Israel, and Japan. In fact, in 1997, Austria legislated their Telecommunication Act, and here we are, over 15 years later, and we are still waiting to find out a date for the thing to be implemented. But despite being a late adopter of this kind of legislation, Canada is having a much more strict policy than many of these other countries. The biggest things that businesses will have to worry about are non-compliance and class action lawsuits. But really one follows the other, so if you make sure all of your bases are covered, then you don't have to worry about being sued. But be prepared, because even if the smallest details aren't followed, people will come after your business. And there are people out there who will sue you if they can. So make sure you have every aspect covered. You don't want to shell out that $10 million plus whatever legal fees that you'll have to owe. There are two types of consent, implied and express. Implied consent is when there's already an existing relationship between the sender and the receiver. Or the receiver has conspicuously published their email address somewhere on the internet, or the receiver has disclosed their email address and told the sender that they don't want to receive any more messages. In these few circumstances, implied consent is enough under the new legislation. But the lines are very blurred, and it's easy to get lost and not follow the rules. So it's probably best to stick with express consent. Express consent is when the customer actively engages with the sender and gives their email address and their information willingly. Express consent is the best path to follow under this new law. So if you're like me, you probably like to procrastinate, and it is so easy to do. But in this case, you probably want to start preparing ahead of time. Before the new law comes into effect, you have to make sure that you have express consent from anyone who will be receiving your messages. This is from an opt-in approach, which is very different from what most countries are following, which is an opt-out approach. So start with just that. Make sure that you have consent from all of your customers. Depending on your current practices, you may already have a large portion of your customer base already giving you their consent. But if there are any that haven't given you their consent, or you're unsure whether or not they did give consent, then just shoot them off a message where they have to take an active step to say, yes, keep on sending me what you've been sending me. Besides just being prepared, another advantage of preparing early for the anti-spam legislation is how it looks to the recipients of your digital messages. If you start early and do everything you can to make sure you are following regulations, your customers will notice. They will appreciate that you're being proactive, and they will also appreciate that you're being honest in what you're sending in your messages, and that you aren't trying to spam them. So let's be honest here. All of these rules that the Canadian government is setting out for you to follow is going to better how you communicate with your customers. So don't fight it, embrace it. So I hope you all enjoyed this video blog of mine, and I will be posting another one next Tuesday, so I'll see you then.